Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast State of the Balance. Here with me, your host, Imperial Dane, covering today, March 2018. How things looked here the last half month? Well, not particularly amazing. I mean, we're basically still stuck with the same meta that was initiated with the December patch, which I definitely wasn't a fan of. Still, I am not. And things haven't exactly improved. I mean, right now, I'd probably describe the Surge as being sort of the top faction at the moment. It's pretty much the most played, so if you're wondering, hang on, or those are the Allies, why am I seeing so much Soviets lately? It's because pretty much almost everyone is playing the Soviets at the moment, which rather means that, you know, a lot of the choices are Soviets, and, you guessed it, occasionally Brits or Americans, but right now, again, the vast majority are playing Soviets. So why is that? Well, basically, they just pushed the Soviets really hard during that December patch. They buffed a lot of units, inadvertently also buffed some other units, part about nerfing German stuff, but also just by buffing other units that covered up further other units, really sort of leading to sort of a increasingly situation where the Surge is just really well positioned in the meta, and it just gets even worse on 2 vs 2s and above. So, I mean, basically they started buffing conscripts, not just making them also cheaper and faster to throw, they also just straight up buffed the conscripts themselves, which just basically means the Soviets already had pretty good conscripts, to be honest, and I don't buy into the ones who say they weren't. They were good, trust me. As a guy who regularly, you know, was in the top 100 with the Soviets, conscripts were good, really good. And, well, buffing them really just made them even better. Toss in a buff to hit the dirt, which just made the submachine guns even more better, and they were already pretty good as well. And you're sort of just already just moving towards a state where the Surge is just pretty amazing. Guardsmen got buffed, which also had the knock-on effect of just making snipers even better, because they already had Surge snipers, pretty weak counters due to the fact they just had more health than most snipers, plus 2 models. And, well, buffing guardsmen, which of course means sure that even weak counters like the 2-2, for example, again, they're already weak counters, the sniper got even weaker since the snipers were more easily covered up, plus the fact that German snipers can't be used to really count it out. And just really stuck in a situation where, like, the Surge sniper just got so much stronger due to everything around it, which really did, you know, help out the situation with the Surge already being pretty good, on top of the H-16 being pretty solid, the SIS-3 being pretty solid, and just a lot of other things being really solid. They also buffed the IL-2, you know, strafe, which is just pretty good, and now became, I mean, pretty much like it was back in the beginning of the game, but it was completely insane. Like, they just really just pushed the Surge as hard as they could. When the faction was already in a pretty good spot, they just made it even better. And that's basically Assault on the Surge right now, just being really strong. You can go for conscript builds, you can go for penal tool builds, you can go for sniper builds, you can go for maxim builds, you can go for guards builds. Like, you got so many choices as the Surge right now, you can just go many ways. I'm even seeing players now pushing for fast anti-aircraft half decks, because guess what? They're pretty good too, though the T-70 is still pretty damn good. The H-26 is pretty damn good. You got players rushing for T-34 76s, rushing for the T-35s. You got players going for the R2s. Like, the Surge can go in most directions. So right now, what is very common is they'll usually choose a doctrine with guardsmen in it, because again, the guardsmen are absolutely amazing. So guard rifle, guard motor, very common doctrines. I mean, there'll be players who go for other things, but right now, again, just it's guards for the Soviets. And really, what needs to be nerfed is the guards. They got pushed way too hard. Like, they definitely have to nerf the PTRS. That should not be as good versus medium and heavy armor as it is. Like, the deflection damage needs to go. It's an anti-tank rifle, which is already pretty weak at the start of the war. It's not supposed to be amazing versus tanks. It's there to help versus light vehicles, and that's it. So that one needs to be nerfed. The guards themselves need to be nerfed a bit. Snipers definitely need to be nerfed hard or removed from the game. Would be a personal, opinion, but obviously just nerf. They need to be easier to kill, or they need to shoot a lot bloody slower, or they need some sort of setup time. Either way, Surge snipers need to get hit, and I think they also need to nerf the H-6 penetration, so it can't easily penetrate heavy armor at range too. Like, nerf the H-6 a bit. I think we can sort of do that, also sort of lower some of the conscript buffs as well. They'll be much sort of getting to the spot again, but the Surge is still pretty great, just not insanely great as they are right now, which again is sort of one of the primary issues. They're just bonkers. So that's sort of it. Following up, we got the Brits. You know, again, also another pretty strong faction, but just a bit tricky to play than the Soviets, but still pretty strong. In part, the issue is basically just the infantry sections, you know, got buffed essentially. Again, for some reason decided, alright, British infantry is pretty amazing in cover and outside of cover. We need to make them better outside of cover. And, you know, Bob's your uncle, you got Brit blobs and just Brit infantry spam. In part, again, again, they're just making the bed out of card, which was a really terrible idea, but also because they got access to an amazing, upgrade that just allows them to turn the 4-man squads into 5-man squads for next to no cost. Tossing, fast tech with the amazing AC in the center, and you usually got a strategy that involves get a bunch of sections up, push for an AC. If they get anything up, they could threaten your infantry, then push for the center and usually destroy your opponent. If that fails, go for the crocodile. So, I mean, in that sense, I think the answer is much more simply what needs to happen with the Brits. I mean, there's also special weapons and such doctrine, but, I mean, that's a bit more right. Overall, the sort of main path is a lot of sections, AC, center, and again, maybe crocodile or something else. I mean, what needs to be happening there is the AC gets nerfed. That needs to be less amazing versus infantry for starters. I mean, it's just way too efficient. It's pretty much a light tank that can take on medium tanks, even heavy tanks on its own. Like, either it's good versus infantry and light vehicles, or it's good versus light vehicles and heavier stuff. But it can't be, good versus both light infantry, light vehicles, and medium armor. At that point, you're just sort of pushing it too far. And right now, it's just too good versus everything. Similarly, the infantry section needs to, have the whole bolster section, right away available. Stop. Take that to the final tier. That should not be an early game upgrade, not in an army like the British. That is just terrible. That needs to go to a later tier. And finally, the center never needed to be buffed. That needs to just be reverted. Just straight up revert that buff. That's all that needs to happen really there. If that were to happen, I think the Brits would be much, neater spot. They also think need to just revert the limit how many Bren guns they can carry in infantry section to 1, because if it was bad the Grenadiers could carry, 2 light machine guns, then the Brits, which by the Bren gun pretty much effectively is an LMG-42, should not be able to carry 2 on the sections which are tougher than the German infantry section. I mean, come on, let's stick to the rules here. So, I mean, that's definitely something that needs to happen. And also the Vickers K. So, yeah, there definitely needs to be some nerfs involved there if there's anything that's supposed to be right in this world. That was something really needs to get heavily buffed for the Germans. And seemingly how so far they've pretty much only nerfed the Germans when they're supposed to buff them. I'm not too confident in that one. So, there you go. That's sort of the Brits. The Americans, sort of probably the more fair of all of the 3 factions. And then again, I'm not entirely sure about that one. I mean, if you balance the Brits and the Americans, I'm not entirely sure which one is actually the nasty of the 2 at the moment, but they're pretty still, pretty strong. But, let's for argument's sake, the Americans are, of the 3, heavily pushed, but still pretty strong. I mean, their strategies tend to involve just going for a bunch of riflemen, going for the lieutenant, which is pretty strong, into an anti-aircraft after, and again, go leading ahead. That can really lock down a lot of things, because that can be tricky to counter depending on the faction, particularly the Wehrmacht can find itself in a sore spot versus that. Recon support is pretty strong. There's also airborne and other doctrines that do see some uses. And of course, heavy cavalry with a Pershing is reasonably popular, though Rifle Company flamethrowers and the EC8 are making, I think, quite a comeback for the Americans. I mean, overall, I think still they need to just nerf the rifle a bit. They are still really, I think, way too good. In particular, we could just add double BARs, which is quite frankly utterly filthy to them. Like, nerf the BAR and nerf the rifleman. I think that's basically what needs to happen there with the Americans. Like, riflemen have just been way too good for quite some time, and like that just needs to stop if they want to buff anything else with the Americans. That just needs to stop, period. Like, otherwise it's just not rest going to stick together, because again, you just make them crazy with any sort of small buff. So like, something needs to happen there with the rifleman. I think that's sort of the main priority here, to be honest. Like, the rest they can sort of get away with, but the rifleman have just been too good for too long, and that needs to stop. I mean, there's still the whole bit, where at some point you can, ask, well, should we remove smoke from the riflemen? No, about just nerfing them, because, like, they want to start rifle blobs, but the issue with the rifle blobs was, because the riflemen themselves were insane. So just nerf the riflemen so there's less intention just rifle blobbing under smoke, that's simple, but instead they just removed the smoke, shifted away, but didn't really fix the core issue, which is the riflemen are just nuts, particularly with double BARs. So, I mean, that's, I think, what they just need to get around to doing with the Americans, to be honest. I mean, the rest they can probably get away with, but as long as riflemen are just that good, in particular upgraded, there's going to be problems down the road. And done with the Allies. I mean, again, a lot of this stuff here saying just gets a lot worse in, team games and above. Like, they could just really heavily spam out stuff. Again, they say they want to stop spam strategy in team games, but essentially, when it comes to the Allies, they just made it worse. Sniper spam, maximum spam, H-16 spam, 50 caliber spam, anti-tank gun spam, you name it. Like, all the allies do is spam pretty effortlessly, and in most cases win. So, I mean, there's definitely some issues there. But moving on to the Oberkommando West, I mean, we sort of got a very series of strategies. Most tend to involve just going for a lot of Volksgrenadiers, while the Sturmpioneers got slightly buffed. It really wasn't enough, I think, to really get them anywhere. While we will see some going for more than one Sturmpioneer squad, most players just still stick to the Volksgrenadiers because they're still just more cost efficient. There'll be some Arcadenavs, there'll be some light infantry guns. The flak half-tank, of course, heavily called on, and the Lux has pretty much in most cases been phased out. The flak half-tank might be a bit too good, could probably do with a small price increase, whereas the Lux probably, I don't know, maybe needs to be a bit faster to build and a bit more cheaper, I don't know, but right now the Lux just isn't remotely comparable to the flak half-tank. The flak half-tank just straight up wins out, in particular because you can also get medics with the Battle Group Headquarters. With a mechanized regiment you don't. So in this regard, the Battle Group Headquarters on a lot of levels just now wins out over the mechanized regiment, and that really just sort of has resulted in Oberkommando West strategy becoming very homogenized. Now they push straight for the Schwerpanzer quarters, go for Panzer IVs. Panthers just don't see much usage because the Panther still, for the most part, sucks in terms of firepower, which really is the issue with all the Panthers. They just don't have enough firepower to be worth it, so you go for the Panzer IV, which is better versus infantry as well, has better rate of fire, and costs, you know, a more affordable price. So, again, they need to buff the Oberkommando's Panther, make it more useful, either for abilities or something else. But something needs to happen with the Oberkommando's Panther. Obersoldaten are catching on more, people realizing, hey, these are actually good now, and particularly to some extent actually necessary. So, those are sort of becoming more common, more played overall for the Oberkommando West. King Tigers are falling off overall. I definitely think the nerf to the King Tiger was utterly silly. There was no logical reason for it, just like there wasn't a logical reason to buff the Sherman, buff the Soviets, Guardsmen, and so on, so on, so on. I mean, again, it's just one of those really inexplicable design choices they made during that previous patch, and they really just need to revert the nerfs to the King Tiger. Or, if they're really, really insistent on keeping it like that, they need to lower the veterans requirements because they're utterly absurd. Like, still most of the Oberkommando veterans requirements are nuts. Like, lower them or fix the King Tiger back to how it used to be. I mean, they can't really have it both ways. Like, have it, you know, not be very good, be expensive, and have terrible veterans requirements. So, that needs to something that needs to give there. That needs to give on top of everything else. And finally on to the Wehrmacht, the faction we just can't catch a break here. I mean, in 1 versus 1 you can sort of still pull it off, but again, as I've been saying, you had to do before the patch, you have to play it aggressively. Again, the late game defensive faction, you have to play it as an aggressive faction, early game faction, and that only became even more necessary with the patch. Like, they just further forced it into what it's apparently not supposed to be, but again, that's very much how it has to operate in the current meta. You just cannot play it easily, you cannot play, you know, defensively. You have to play it aggressively, you have to keep pushing hard, really hard. And while there of course should be an option as a faction, it's right now the only option. Most Wehrmacht builds are pretty much the same. Grenadiers, MD42, fast tech, flame for half tech, or pack, maybe a 2-2, and then fast into Panzer IVs. Like, everything is just increasingly been centered around the Panzer IV and the Austrian they effectively nerfed. And really they need to just straight up buff it this time around. Just straight up buff it, or at least revert the buffs, in quotation mark, it got. Like, that just needs to happen. And, well, you know, if they're really going to pin everything in the Panzer IV, they really need to buff it to make it a bit more worth this price level, because still, even for the price level it's got, and again, it's probably one more difficult medium tank to get, it still doesn't compare to most of the Allied ones. Again, it's just weird. Again, this late game faction's late game is still kind of rubbish, and the Wehrmacht Panther still is pretty rubbish. It's, while in case you still see some usage from a few hipsters, I mean, overall, if you want to win as the Wehrmacht, you're going Panzer Force and you're going Stugs, and particularly even remotely behind the Panther's a terrible choice. The Sturmpanzer is a reasonable choice. See some usage here and there, can be useful, but the Panther's just out. The Panzerwerfer is just no good either. I mean, compared with the Katyusha, the Panzerwerfer is just not efficient enough at all. So there definitely needs to be some, again, changes to the Wehrmacht late game. It needs to actually have some teeth. There needs to be some bite into the situation. Otherwise, it's just going to, again, be pointless. And they might as well just straight up remove tier 4 and just, I don't know, buff the Panzer IV or whatever the heck they want to, probably nerf it. Panzergrenadiers maybe also could do with a small buff here and there in some way, because I mean they're going to struggle heavily when you're pushing out new infantry again late game. In this regard, I'd still probably just recommend some kind of Obersoldaten variant for tier 4, sort of help out for the Wehrmacht's late game. You know, pretty much the infantry gets squished easily and they can't replace it with something that's done up to like veteranly 3 allied infantry, which is a lot harder to wipe. So I mean, there's still a lot of the same Wehrmacht issues that were before the patch and sort of been persisting throughout the last couple of months. I mean, overall, while you can still win, you just have to put in a ton more effort than the Allies as the Wehrmacht. I mean, again, you can win, you can sometimes superfluously win over your opponent, but you're nonetheless putting in a lot more effort than your opponent. Again, you had to put in more effort before the patch, now just to put even more effort into it. I mean, they really did not in any way help the Wehrmacht, and the patch was for the Wehrmacht, I think, for the most part, a complete and utter disgrace. So there you have it. I mean, again, buff the Austrian, do something with active Wehrmacht tier 4 that makes it worth it, and again, either making the Panzergrenadiers a bit more useful or sneaking in something for tier 4 in terms of infantry. Like, something needs to happen there as well. So there you go. That's the state of the balance for March 2018. Rough period, and while I'm hearing some talk about, you know, balanced patches, I'm so far not really seeing anything beyond just talk and rumors. So obviously I'll make a video once we finally get something more official, but for now this is rumors. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully it gave some decent. You know, subscribe, like, share, comment on it, post your own thoughts on the matter. This is Imperial Dane though, signing off. I'll be back another time for another video. If you'd like me to do consider donating or pledging on Patreon. Links in the video description. Every little bit helps. Cheers and see you all.